Today, I'm so honored and excited to be talking to my friend and colleague, Dr. Gina Wong. Before we start, I'd like to introduce Gina. Dr. Gina Wong is a registered psychologist in the province of Alberta. And she's also a professor and program director for Athabasca University's Masters of Counseling program. And she is the founder and ambassador of the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign, which she'll share more with us later. Gina, welcome. I'm very
Hi,
excited.
Gina. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, been looking forward to our conversation. So, Gina, with most all of my guests, we start by letting the listeners know how we met.
Okay.
So, do you want to start by sharing how we met?
Oh my goodness, Gina, how many years back has it been?
My memory's pretty good. I believe it was 2011.
2011.
That's
Are you?
10 years.
Wow, that's 10 years, so a decade ago.
Wow.
So, Gina, you were a graduate student in our program, Master Counseling program, and stood out above all other students in terms of just your approach, the way that you would be in the discussion forums. And then you had approached me to do your master's thesis. And I, despite not having room or time to do that, I jumped at the chance, especially with the topic that you had, which was about the Chinese language.
Mhm.
So I guess that, we've been friends and colleagues ever since. Yeah, lots of serendipity, I think, Gina. We were meant to meet.
So you're right, Gina. In terms of my thesis, I'll just share the title. If I think I can remember, it was titled "Inspiring Bilingualism: Chinese Canadian Mother Stories." So how fitting today we're talking about our conversation today will be about part of it is the anti-Asian racism that's going on.
Yes, yes, very fitting. Very.
Yeah. So Gina, if it's okay to start with telling me your story. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, that's broad when you say that. But I guess I'll, kind of share about what happened to me about a month ago. And, as a full-fledged academic and full-fledged psychologist, working hard in that endeavor. Although I published and done a little bit of work around cross-cultural and culture infused in counseling. It wasn't a huge emphasis for me in my professional world. And I was asked to do a little bit of media with my university, and so we were booked. And the day that we were booked, it was CTV Live National, and it was the day after the Atlanta shootings. And so I was able to speak about that tragedy that had just happened, and in a sense, gained a platform in many ways. I think because of that, and then some subsequent media that I did. And it's interesting because you never know what life will pull you into.
Mhm.
And often when I was interviewed, people would ask me about my own experiences. Did I experience racism? What was that like for me? And I would talk about the psychological impact, and I would share my experiences because yes, I have experienced that in my life. And as I was doing that, I could feel myself reprocessing some of those experiences. And in fact, I was verbalizing some of those experiences that had never been verbalized before. And I
Mhm.
had quite a few experiences, and I'd forgotten about many of them actually, kind of tuck it away, or I tucked it away in my brain. So as I was doing these media interviews, I was going through my own process of coming to terms with thinking about these over again, which I welcome because I think that kind of processing is necessary, and for me to do that in my life. But I had no idea that I had a void that
Mhm.
needed to be filled. I had no idea in this area.
Yeah.
And as I was doing these interviews and getting more involved and speaking about what had happened to me and in general, um, just how horrible it is right now in today's day and age with what's going on with the association with coronavirus and the pandemic. So I one day just visualized this, what it would be like, a different world for the generation like my children's, to live in a world where there is Asian pride and there's a sense of, celebration in who we are instead of what it feels like currently, which is shame, um, invisibility, embarrassment, some of those feelings. And so, I'll talk a little bit more later on, but that's how the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign was birthed. Um, and so I do go back to my own experiences, and every day I would say that I do think about this from a personal perspective, and my passion for this comes very grounded in my own heart and what's happening in the world, watching the attacks on television and reading about the kinds of things that are happening. It's deplorable and heartbreaking, and I can't believe in today's day and age that these kinds of things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the experiences, well, I guess two of the experiences that I talk about and have started talking about more publicly is, my experience when I was in grade 1. So I was born in Montreal. My parents are immigrants from China. And so, yeah, so born in Montreal, and we were the only Chinese family, we were the only Asian family in the neighborhood in Montreal. And so after school, almost every day, and on the weekends, if I was walking around the neighborhood, I would experience racism. And I'm not sure what it was, because something about me, I'm not sure, because my sisters didn't seem to experience it as much. But, how old are you in grade 1? I'm thinking,
Around 5, 6.
yeah, yeah. And maybe I was a little bit older because in Montreal, you pre-kindergarten. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe 7, 8. So, yeah, almost every day after school and on the weekends, kids would spit at me. They would kick me. They would chase me. They pull at their sides of their faces to imitate, my Chinese eyes, and they would, have racial slurs and kind of laugh. And, so I'd be running, or I'd be, afraid of it happening after school. And I would always, be on the lookout for that. So growing up with that experience, you know, um, it sets in an internalized racism. There was something wrong about me, was what I gathered about that, because you don't, in the little mind, you don't know how to make sense of that. And I didn't tell anybody. I kind of told my sisters, and they would sometimes come and, go look for the person and that kind of thing. But for the most part, it was something I just kept inside. And I don't actually have, solid memory of what I actually felt about it, but I know, years later, the impact, being ashamed of being Chinese, of looking different, of, not belonging and not feeling like I had a place. Lots of long-standing impact.
Yeah, I'm hearing some words such as internalized racism and shame. And would you let the listeners know, for some who are not familiar with some
Hmm.
internalized racism,
Hmm.
what does that mean?
Well, just the sense of who I am, and and what I represent, and my identity was not what was right. There was something wrong with it. Because of the way that I was treated, I started believing that that's what I deserved for some reason. And I started to deny those parts in me, and wanting to be something else, wanting to be like the white children, wanting to look different, wanting to, act different and not be whatever it was that they made fun of. I needed to be different.
To kind of,
So, in that sense, you turn against yourself.
yeah, to kind of disown those parts of yourself,
Yes.
right? Like that's
Yes.
something I is not maybe in your experience attractive or lovable. So we
Right.
sometimes, yeah, just try to be far away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say maybe not disown, because disown would suggest that I had an ownership of my identity at that time. And
Mm,
I would say, at that age, I'm just forming who I am. I'm just trying to, create a template of understanding of what is okay for me in this world and what's not. And
mm,
so, yeah, the answer was, you're not okay who you are. And so I took that in to feel like I had to be different. So, it's kind of like denouncing who I who I was inside.
Mhm.
And I was able to do that. Didn't speak Chinese, didn't want to be very much associated with it, and just, yeah, tried to be different in what ways I could be.
Mhm. And Gina, you also mentioned you didn't really tell anyone. You did tell some of your sisters. So can you tell me more about that for not telling many people about those experiences?
I don't know. I just didn't, I'm not sure why I didn't. I was little. My parents worked very hard, coming as immigrants. And I'm not sure. I would be making up as
Yeah.
to the reason why I didn't tell them, but I know that they were hardworking, and if I look back, I would probably think I didn't want to bother them with them, or what is it that they could do, I guess,
Hmm.
in that sense.
As you're saying this, Gina, and as you know, I work with a lot of Asian clients in my private practice. So there's this thread, this theme of not telling people, kind of what you just said. What can my parents do? Would they understand? They're so busy making a living, just surviving,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
mhm.
very much. Well, Gina, it was, in one of the videos I watched that you created, where the word "yun," the Cantonese word, and I've been talking about that in the media. You taught me, about that, and it's the suppression of self. It's the holding in, the tolerating, the not speaking out. Don't make waves. Just be happy to be there, but be invisible.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I felt that pressure so much when I was 7 or 8, but certainly growing up through the years, and even to this day, I have to kind of get myself to speak out and stand for my rights and create my boundaries. I'm better at it now, but it's something that I think in our culture is also part of part of our culture and part of how we're stereotyped in
Mhm.
addition.
Yeah, as you're saying that, Gina, we're both in different roles in different universities, but we're in leadership roles, right?
Yes.
And sometimes I notice myself in, let's say, a faculty meeting or meeting new people. I notice that I tend to be the listener. I sit
Mhm.
back for a long time to kind of get to know the room. Now we're on Zoom and or Teams, and then I would start to speak up. In a way, it's interesting. I start to build up confidence. I have something to say about this.
Mhm.
I need to say it. And how do I formulate my message?
Yes.
How is it?
Yes.
So I noticed that about myself.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I've witnessed it, Gina, in some meetings that we've been in. I'm
Yeah.
applauding you, and when we take up these leadership roles, as Asian women, we're really, you know, taking that stereotype and kind of shredding it. And I think we need to do that and encourage more Asian women, Asian men, the bamboo ceiling where a lot of the, workers working hard, or laborers, and we don't go for the CEOs positions as much. There's a huge disproportionate representation of Asians in the higher leadership positions. And
Mhm.
we just need to change that. So good for you. Good for me.
And you've been my mentor for so many years, Gina. I've learned a lot from watching you, in some of these meetings, and right, and uh, taken on that role of the leader. And one of the books that sometimes we talk about is Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, right? Like really leaning into the discomfort. And so,
Very
Gina,
much.
yeah, I'm curious if you can tell me about. I know with the media, you introduced this lived experience of being spit on and hit on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So fast forward from being in grade 1 and a few years of that living in Montreal, and then in my adolescence living in Edmonton. So I would say in my grade 7, 8, 9, junior high years, these three boys specifically would always sing My Little China Girl to me, the one by David Bowie. And, it was, if you can imagine the experience of being hated for some reason to the point where people are spitting on you, and then suddenly getting male attention, and they're singing My Little China Girl, would which would feel like attention and one of wanted attention. But the way that they would sing it, if you look at the lyrics, and it is so racist, those lyrics. It's just, it's not even subliminal. It's racist right to the core. One of the lyrics is, "Oh baby, why don't you just shut your mouth?" And Bowie is singing it, and he's intending for the Asian woman to be saying that to him. But the way that these boys would sing it to me would be, "My little China girl, and why don't you just shut your mouth?" So it was this, okay, they're paying attention to me, they're singing me a song, they're calling me something that might sound like an endearment, but actually, they're then saying something really negative. So I was very confused, not sure again how to feel about that, except that I didn't like it. I didn't like being singled out. But then part of me, when I would hear the first part, it was sort of like, well, you know, they're paying attention to me. So in my, adolescent mind, that did its own, also set of confusion around my value and my worth, and the sexualization and fetishization of Asian women, that they're calling me something that might sound like an endearment, but actually they're then saying something really negative. So I was very confused, not sure again how to feel about that, except that I didn't like it. I didn't like being singled out. But then part of me, when I would hear the first part, it was sort of like, well, you know, they're paying attention to me. So in my, adolescent mind, that did its own, also set of confusion around my value and my worth. Telling that story raises a lot of emotion within me. Actually, I got a little bit tearful. But I think that that's exactly the reason why we have to tell these stories and share them and be visible and verbal and voice. And, my experience is only that of one. And there's thousands, millions of other stories of the ways, from microaggressions to attacks to murder. Um, so, I'm not representing all of those stories, of course, but I can represent mine and how painful it is to share and the emotions that it brings up. So thank you for letting me talk about that, Gina.
Um, and Gina, we have been connecting quite a bit lately. We're either sometimes texting or on the phone or a quick phone call, and we have mourned together. We have cried together, right? It's been really, really tough. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine doing all these interviews, with the media, holding on. It's heavy, heavy stuff. And now this campaign, right?
Mhm. And at the same time, it's the most joyous, meaningful, fulfilling work that I'm doing. And Gina, I'm doing it with the support of people, including you, who's, buoying the whole campaign and the need for this Asian movement, renewal, an optimistic renewal in the way that we see and perceive Asian people. So, so I thank you.
You're absolutely right, Gina. When you say joyous, before we press record, I was just sharing that I wake up in the morning with so much just kind of, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, excitement for the day, because I know that I'll be meeting like someone like you, Gina, I guess, to talk about, what's going on in the world and to have these meaningful, hopefully transformative conversations and to do
Mhm.
something about,
Yes,
right,
yes,
anti-Asian racism and racism in general.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Gina, would you share with me your campaign? Is that, yeah, the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign?
Yes, yes. The Asian Gold Ribbon campaign is just what I was saying. It's a hope to continue this momentum of an Asian movement. I was thinking yesterday about the Chinese characters for crisis is opportunity, and danger put together. And, you know, unfortunately, with the crisis, you know, the state of emergency that the world is in right now and how anti-Asian racism has skyrocketed, and in particular, what happened in Atlanta, it's a crisis. And we can take that, and this is our opportunity to center conversations about the needs of Asians, to put it on the agenda, to no longer be sidelined, and to discuss and portray what it is that I think we've been silent for so long about. So social change movement, a desire to, you know, instill pride and you know, the heritage and the culture of, you know, of Asian people. And so the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign, we have three pillars, so tri-focus initiatives, all of which include youth. So it's so important, you know, in conceiving of this idea of the campaign is that our future is our youth. If we want this reset in the world, we need to educate and involve our youth. So we currently have 3 youth ambassadors representing different provinces. We are looking for US ambassadors and other youth ambassadors from around the world. So that's a very important part of the campaign for us. So the 3 pillars include the visibility campaign. So Thursday, May 20th is the inaugural Asian Gold Ribbon Day. And so I'm wearing my Asian Gold Ribbon, which is, we have a video on our website, asiangoldribbon.com, of a do-it-yourself of how to make the Asian Gold Ribbon. And we also have masks. We've partnered with Community Masks in Toronto. They're very, you know, it's a wonderful organization, very philanthropic. And so they're donating some of the proceeds back to our campaign. And so we have the Asian Gold Ribbon on the mask. And we also have 2 pins that we're selling as well for people to wear throughout May, you know, they're not just for May to be wearing, but on May 20th, our visibility campaign, which because of COVID, is an online virtual campaign. So having people tweet, Instagram, post as many as possible selfies and photos to say that we stand together against anti-Asian racism and we celebrate and have pride in the Asian heritage and culture. Along with the visibility campaign is a part, and Gina, you've contributed to the Speak Up and Be Seen visibility campaign. So we have a Flipgrid resource where people can upload a 1.5 minute video. They can edit it as many times as they'd like and upload. And it's to share something. It's to share anything. You know, share something you've never told before, or just say that you support anti-Asian racism, anything. So to contribute that and be seen and heard. And then, you know, we've got, you know, things like email insignia. So I'm proud to be Asian, or I'm against anti-Asian racism. So you can download it from our website and add it to your email signature. We also have a Facebook profile border, I guess it's called, that people can also download and use. So very visible, you know, that statement to show the youth and also to involve the youth, you know, that this is not acceptable any longer, the current status quo. So we also have a fundraising pillar. And as a psychologist, I can see the need for integrated mental health services for Asian individuals. And when I go over, you know, to our neighbor, to the United States, there are many programs and coalitions and collectives across the US that cull together the information for what's available for Asian mental health. I would love to have the same in Canada. We need to have the same in Canada. We compel donations to the Hong Fook Mental Health Association in Toronto, which is one of those integrated centers. There are a few in Vancouver as well, but Gina, I haven't been able to find, you know, hopefully they message me to say, oh, we've been doing this, but funds to go towards more integrated services, mental health for Asians. And then our other arm, so our last arm, not last, but our community outreach. And so Gina, we're so pleased that against, against the tides of racism is included in our community outreach. The work that you're doing to interview and bring to light to the public issues of racism in your podcast is, a delightful part of our outreach um, campaign. And the other is that we're doing workshops and presentations to different organizations, different corporations who are interested in learning about anti-Asian racism and what they can do, what the stereotypes are, how to not fall into them. What are some of the unintended, unconscious biases that might be happening around, anti-Asian racism? So, there are, I'm thankful, and it's heartening, some of the organizations that are getting in touch with us who want to have a presentation where we're talking about these issues.
Mhm.
And then one of the, I think, to me, essential part of our campaign is the educational resources that we're creating for schools to be using. So the Edmonton Public School Board, for example, is interested in the resources that we're creating. We're talking with a number of different school districts um, to offer some, basically we're putting together some video clips. So it's, educators can pull the ones that are meaningful for them, for what they want to share with students. And so currently we have one of our youth ambassadors, Emma Yee, who's in Edmonton, and she's interviewing her yaya. And he has actually written a book for the family about his great grandfather's experience immigrating to Canada and paying the $500 head tax. So Emma is interviewing her grandfather, a series of questions. It's lovely, and we're having that as part of the video series that we're offering, and we'll have a few other videos also celebrating, Asian culture and pride, and then the do-it-yourself videos so that students at home can make their own video, make their own ribbon. I mean, if they would like to participate, and other kinds of probes or kinds of activities that students can do. And of course, recognizing right now, a lot of schools are now online, and so the face-to-face connectivity isn't there. And so our campaign is aware of that. So that's in a nutshell what the campaign represents and what we're doing.
Gina, when you said Asian pride, right? I think this is so powerful, and involving youth is absolutely a must. As you know, in my own PhD research, I involved quite a few youth in an action research project. Right, these are South Asian youth who talks about the stigma of mental health, who talks about racism, and we also, so you have two daughters, Gina. I have a daughter and a son, right? Absolutely amazing, Gina. I'm at a loss for words in terms of this campaign. So I hope, we hope everyone is going to be a part of it. So Gina, can you repeat the website name?
Yes, it's the asiangoldribbon.com.
Okay. So asiangoldribbon.com, and I'll also have it on my website so that you can click onto it.
Yes. And Gina, I'll just add, so on May 20th, we're, you know, right now planning the activities for that day, for the inaugural Asian Gold Ribbon Day. One of the events will be a youth panel talking about their experiences of being, of Asian descent. I think our youth, many of them are biracial, and so talking about what that's like in that experience, and have they experienced racism, what are their thoughts, what are their needs. So that's one of the planned activities currently, and there's also another panel that we're working on, and that of course will be on our website.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing that, Gina. I remember talking about the two of us about by being biracial, where people would say, "Well, you're not Asian enough. You're not really Asian. You're only half, right?" So, and our world is becoming more and more biracial.
Mhm, mhm. The funny thing is, Gina, when they say biracial, because of the internalized racism that I experienced, and because I feel like I've somehow tricked myself that I'm white inside in this, this way of trying to manage in some ways, when I hear the word biracial, I feel like I identify with that because
Mhm.
there's a whiteness in me that I conjured up in order to survive. And so there's, biracial in the sense of, like my children who are, mixed and half Chinese and then there's, I don't know what the term, we should come up with one, Gina, but, where I feel biracial in that sense of, my experience.
Mm. That's that's an important point, right? Where in my research, in my master's research, there's some literature about, for example, if you don't speak the language, then are you really Chinese? If you
Right.
are second, third generation, how close are you from in terms of um, the Chinese culture, right? And some of those participants in those studies may feel that they are biracial and growing up in a bicultural, environment where they're Asian, being raised in Canada, and being in the school system, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. You
mhm,
just need one drop of, DNA or blood and you are Asian.
mhm,
It's not about knowing, by heart the customs or to have celebrated. It's who you are. And, I've had lots of discussions like that as well. And in my family, of thinking about, well, I'm not cooking enough Chinese food, I'm feeling like I'm not sort of standing behind the culture, but it no less makes us, who we are, and we are Asian.
mhm, mhm. There's so much to talk about, Gina. But because of time, at the end of every meeting with my guests, we come together and we co-create some calls for action, like moving forward. What would be important for our listeners to know, to hear? Of course, this Asian Gold Ribbon campaign is phenomenal, and we have confidence that it will generate a lot of important conversations, and the awareness will be there. So calls for action. Gina, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Hmm. Well, I just first want to say that to me, this campaign is already wildly successful
Hmm.
because of the people that I've met and because in my own life, y- having conversations that are never have been conversations I've had. I'm meeting people and we're sharing our experiences of racism growing up as like within the first 5 minutes.
Hmm.
So, my goal of conversation raising and, having a platform and, some people will wear the gold ribbon and it might, I'm hoping it's global, but even if it's not in my experience, this is already successful because we're having the conversations. So I just wanted to say that. Calls for action. Um, for me, it's about a sustained movement. There's this, like I was saying, crisis with what's happening, and it happens to be, May is Asian Heritage Month. So, conversation, lots of things. The school system is, doing some things, but we can't stop at that. A call to action is to have this a sustained movement where we continue to have these dialogues, we continue to talk about the oppression and racism that we experience, and we demand attention on those matters year round and always.
Hmm.
I want my daughters and my daughters' children to experience being Asian in a different way than I did growing up. So
Hmm.
that's one that I would say.
Gina, may I just jump in here?
Please, yes.
As you're talking about your daughters, in my own life as a mom, I bring up these conversations about anti-Asian racism, and my children are 15 and 12, and we talk openly, of course, developmentally appropriate, right, about what's going on in the world. My daughter's 15, she's on social media, she'll show me some TikTok videos about what she's seeing that's really pretty scary, or and as psychologists, we know that it is important, right, to have these conversations with youth in an appropriate way so that it's not silenced. It's not
Right.
like a taboo, to come to come into these conversations to um, openly and to listen to our youth. And they have lots to teach us as well,
They do. They
right?
do so much. And, you know, as I think about it, the ribbon is a conversation piece. You know, if somebody doesn't know, it's like, oh, why is there an upside down ribbon, you know, that you're wearing? And, you know, a youth might say, well, this is a campaign to celebrate Asians. Oh, well, you know, why is that important? Or, you know, it might be a segue into talking about some of the things that happen to them. It is hard to talk about. And I hope that this campaign allows people the space to talk and get some support around it.
Mhm.
Can I tell you about the ribbon and why it's flipped upside down?
Of course.
Now, I will continue with the calls to action, but I do want to share this because, you know, when I say that I feel like there was this calling to me to do this work, there are things that just kind of are happening that, you know, kind of amaze me with the way that they unfold. And so when I was conceiving the idea of the Asian gold ribbon, I was really drawn to the yellow canary. Yellow for the obvious reason, because we're reclaiming the color and what we were and currently, metaphorically, are being referred to as the yellow peril. So in the 19th century, wanting to not have Asians immigrate to Canada because we were impurities. We were, you know, disease-bringing, virus-infected people that would, you know, threaten the livelihood of Canadians and U.S. citizens. So reclaiming by that color, yellow, and so I chose gold because it's a celebratory yellow. So the yellow canary was calling to me, and so that was, you know, what I would be using in the early times of posting any information about it. And so then I went and I bought my gold ribbon at the craft store and came home and, you know, this is actually the one, and was kind of cutting it to see how I would like it. And, you know, if, you know, if people could see, they could see the two kind of pointy tips at the end. And then I was sitting and I was just kind of saying, well, you know, I don't want it to be the traditional, you know, way that you wear it as you would wear, you know, many of the ribbons that we use for important campaigns. So I kind of flipped it over, and when I looked at it, it, you know, it basically came out to look exactly like the wings of a yellow canary. And I sort of, my partner was like sort of thinking, what's going on, Gina? Because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. So there was the creation of the upside down ribbon with the wings of the yellow canary. And of course, canary with a significance because canaries were the animal used in cages to go down into the coal mines because they, you know, their need for oxygen, they would actually show signs of failure if there was carbon monoxide or other, you know, noxious gases in the environment, which then the miners would know to get out or not work there. Basically, the canary would die if you know there were impure gases in the air. And you know what I read was that they would get to know their pet and they would, you know, whistle to it and sing to it. So they would bring, you know, a little oxygen in case the canary started not thriving. They would cut off the oxygen and, you know, revive, basically keep the canary alive. So the symbolism of this canary being a life-saving mechanism for the miners is also a part of why our logo is the yellow canary and why the gold ribbon is turned the way that it is.
How meaningful, Gina. It's those moments when we're doing something and
Yes,
oh my goodness, this looks like
yes,
you said, like the canary. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah, yeah. And it feels so meaningful in that sense to me. And I hope others, you know, share in that sense of understanding of the meaning. Okay, so calls to action. I kind of sidetracked us a little bit. As I was saying, I think it's of central importance to prioritize the mental health of Asians. I really don't know any Asian right now who isn't feeling this, who probably isn't okay. Not, not to mention the pandemic and what's happening, in the third wave right now, but that it's affecting all of us. Um, so just recognition for that. And the more we have specialized services in places where, people feel comfortable coming, that that is a large call to action in my mind.
Mhm.
A third one is government funding. In the United States, there is government funding that is being, dedicated and put into, um, you know, learning about Asian culture and heritage and against anti-Asian racism. We need to do the same in Canada. We need to step up. The government needs to respond and put some dollars into supporting us and what we need. I think that's so important. Um, I was reading how Illinois last week passed a bill that every school must teach Asian culture, Asian heritage. We Canadians, we need that as well. If it happens to be or needs to be, and the good time to do it is May, Asian Heritage Month, but throughout the curriculum, that it is taught to our children and not sort of, oh, by the way, this racism is happening. And did you know about the head tax? And did you know about, the Japanese internment and all the history? So we need to do that in our school systems to educate our youth. And call to action to wear your ribbon, to support the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign, to have that visible solidarity for us to stand together and celebrate Asian heritage and culture. What about you, Gina? Do you have some thoughts of calls to action? You're involved in this work as much as I am.
I agree. All those calls to action, Gina, absolutely so important. Funding, more mental health support for Asians. School. I was a former teacher, as you know, Gina,
Mm-hmm.
in the education program at the University of Calgary, and we, um, in terms of pre-service teachers, we talk about critical literacy. We talk about infusing the students' culture, right? And absolutely important for everyone to know the history,
Yes,
the head tax, yellow peril, everything we talked about today.
yes, yes.
There is hope that it will
Mm-hmm.
happen with such a campaign as yours, Gina.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to summarize, right?
Can I add one thing, Gina, before you summarize? I just had a conversation with a principal out in Ontario, and her comments were, it's not just the youth that need to be educated. Some of the teachers struggle with this content or don't want to learn the content. And, so that sense of government saying that this must be taught is so symbolic of the support. And those teachers, and I have empathy for them because the racial disparity at this time of life is a lot to hold as an educator, but that, you know, reaching and having curriculum involving this topic would mean that teachers would also need to learn it and be on board and perhaps have some education themselves about the importance of understanding what racism is, across the board, not just talking anti-Asian racism, but, racism that happens for all minoritized individuals. So I just wanted to say that.
Mm. Thank you, Gina. Absolutely. Not just students, teachers, adults, people from all walks of life. In terms of what I was going to say about summarizing, is what I'm hearing, Gina, is that there needs to be education, awareness, and then the part of what we're doing is connection, right? Or I am meeting so many people now that we're going to be learning together on this journey together. You, yep, and continue to, even though this work is not always easy, actually is not easy, right? How do we move forward to cultivate understanding, kindness, compassion, and acceptance?
Yes.
As you said, Gina, is going to be growing up in the world that's different from your experiences, yours and mine as well, which are
Yes.
other episodes.
Yes. Yes. And that every single experience is valuable and valid for us to know and hear. I think sometimes we, think, well, that's how it is. Someone treated me that way. But, to know that each experience is valuable and is important to share and to talk about and to hopefully get some support and connection around. So, yeah, connection is so, so key, Gina. And I'm grateful to have you as one of the close people I'm connected with.
And I'm so grateful to have you in my life. So thank you for spending this hour with me. I know how busy you are with career and this campaign. I'm so grateful, and we're going to move forward and
We
continue
are.
together.
Yes.
So thank you for your time, Gina.
Thank you, Gina. It's happening. We are doing this and we are starting social change. That's already started, but we're galvanizing people and their involvement. So thank you. Thank you for doing this podcast.